A very useful technique to make a mask out of a color image, especially an image with such subtle transitions as you see here in the where the dunes diffuse into softness, and also the model's hair. It's very difficult to actually select that either with a selection tool. Of course, the pen tool won't work. And what you want to do is think different. This technique works especially well for dark against light, or the other way around, light against dark. So it starts by using your eyedropper. You want to make sure your eyedropper is set to 3x3 and sample the background. Now it may look like white, but it's really not. If I go into the color picker, you can see I have a slight tone. So I've sampled the sky. I'm going to add a new layer and Option-Alt-Delete to fill that layer with that background color. Now, we have a number of blending modes here. I want to see everything that's different than the background. So I drop down to the difference layer, and look at that. It's already starting to look like a mask. Sky's black, I've got the nice transition and the hair detail. Now, it takes a little time, a little patience. We want to accentuate that difference even more. I usually start by adding a levels adjustment layer. And let's boost up those blacks just a little bit, make them nice and dense, and increase the whites, give myself a little more contrast. I can zoom in. If I undo the preview, you'll see what I mean. Just a little bit. You don't want too much. Click OK. Now comes some time for some handwork. I need to build the mask up that she's white and the sky is black. I'm going to add another layer, and what you want to do is we're going to fill the bottom of the picture with white. And it's important that you make sure it's really white, so I recommend you tap D and then X. I'm going to grab the lower part of this picture. Notice I'm staying away from these subtle transitions, and Option-Delete. Now, she's got a very smooth edge, so I can take the pen tool, always make sure I'm set to paths. Let me go around her. Because her shoulders are so smooth that I can just grab the clothing. And then I'm going to go around her head. Notice I'm staying away from the edge because the edge of her hair has the transitions that I'm trying to maintain. Now whenever I'm working with a pen tool, I always close the path before going back and refining it. I can see I have a little hiccup here on her shoulder, so I'm going to use the white arrow tool to refine my path. And depending on how important the project was, I would of course take a little bit more time than I am right now to fine-tune this path. Path is also one of those tools that the more time you take with it, the better the results. If you hold down the Option key, I can move one handle, or I can move individual handles and really bend this path into place. Okay, take that path, turn it into a selection. Now my layer again, Option-Delete to fill with white. Now I've dropped the selection. Now we have to create a transition. You can't have this cutout look because that will show up. So I'm going to take a large soft edge brush and build in the transition. I really just use the edge of the brush to soften that transition. Now, if I need to, I will take a very hard-edged brush and outline that earring. because what I'm going to do is I want to replace the sky. The sky is so drab in that picture, and this happens. You have a photo shoot, you have the model set up, you have the location, you got the staff, you show up and the sky doesn't look very good. You have no choice. In most cases, you just have to do the shoot, and now in what's called post, you would recreate the sky. Okay. Now, to create the transitions here between the foreground and this dune grass, I take a very large soft edge brush and I start way down here and I just nudge up because I actually want that natural transition to be in the picture. Just nudge up, go a little smaller. I want to get rid of that harsh line. That harsh line won't look very natural. Okay, so what I'm doing is I've made the mask, but it's in a layer. And I need to transfer all this information into my background layer. In order for the background layer to support a mask, you need to double click on it. I'll name it model. And now load the luminosity. To do that, use your keyboard. Command Option tilde. I'm going to turn off all of these production layers and click on the mask button. And now you see that she's on transparency. I'm going to bring in some new clouds. Just drag those right over. And of course, not very pleasant, we have to put the clouds underneath the model. And let's move them down. There we go. So let's zoom in, and you can see if I move the clouds, that delicate transition. Let's look here. Oh, there's a little nibble I have to fix on her neck. Always view this at 100%. Didn't do a very nice job there, did I? I don't want you to start getting lazy, but in a way, making the alpha mask is the first step in the production. Now it's on the layer mask that you can refine your composite. So I need to reveal more cloud, so I'm going to paint with black, very small of course, to get rid of this white halo here. And there's a number of ways I can do it. I can do it by painting. You can see that gives a nice transition. Let's fix her cheek before we go much further. There we go. A little too harsh. That's better. Here I need to do a little surgery. Now, because I use the pen tool, you notice how harsh this line is? Well, you could paint along it, but try using the blur tool on the layer mask. I'm going to go back and forth. That was only twice. I'm going to reduce that strength. Go back and forth 2 or 3 times. Now if you watch this, let me undo it. See that little bit of softness? That little bit of softness will give the composite the transitions that it needs. And what I do many times is turn off the layer mask by shift clicking on it, and you can check. I notice I lost a little bit of her hair, a little bit of her cheek. So I need to come back and do a little bit more refining. Now of course, if you took the time to build a good path and a good mask, you'd be doing less refining. And I think this is showing you how much time and care actually goes into a good mask. It's never 1, 2, 3, very quick situation. Now, if we want to add a little density to our hair here, what I like to do, let's look at the mask. By option click on it, I can see it. I like using the burn tool on the layer mask too. So, by burn, you notice the halo effect is disappearing. That's because I'm adding density to the layer mask. And if I dodge, more of her hair will show through. There you go. You see how it's becoming darker? So it's always a back and forth, dodging and burning. Let's see how that looks. You can move the clouds any way you like. Okay. Now, if we zoom in, be very careful. I hope you can see this. the original file has a structure from the film grain, and a different film was used for the clouds. That's a dead giveaway for a composite. So we need to add a film grain layer. I'm going to use the film grain on the clouds layer. So what you do to add a film grain layer, come to your layers palette and add a new layer. And let's call it grain. I like naming the layers, helps me avoid confusion. Change your blending mode to soft light and click fill with soft light neutral color. Click OK. And Photoshop's added an invisible neutral layer that's filled with gray set to soft light. And this is a surface that you can use to add noise to. And look at this, I'm watching this and I can use the slider here. Oops, it's too much, isn't it? To get these to match up. Now I try to get it in the ballpark, all right? Because you can always fine tune it with layer opacity. Let's zoom out, and that's going to help that. Now, here's another little giveaway for a composite. This is soft and out of focus because of the wide aperture, or f-stop, that the photographer used. And now the clouds are in focus. That doesn't make any sense. So we need to soften the clouds also. Before I start softening things like clouds, I recommend that you duplicate that layer, because applying a blur is a destructive process. You want to duplicate the layer. So you go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Now it's interesting, I'm blurring the clouds. The film grain is not being blurred, and that's exactly how it happens. Even in out of focus areas, if you're using film, you can still focus on the grain. And now let's see how that looks. Yep, that makes a lot more sense. So this is softer and without. And then there's the film grain. Now one final detail. She's very golden. She probably has a reflector here, and the sky is blue. So she's a little too gold for the lighting. So I'd like to match the lighting. I'm going to sample some of that blue from the sky and come to the model layer, holding down my Option key or Alt key as I choose Photo Filter, because this gives me the group or create clipping mask option. I'm going to click OK. Click OK. Just move this over for a moment. As you can see, the grouping, what it does is it tells the layer that you're adding to only affect the layer directly underneath. And rather than using a canned color, I'm going to use the color that we sampled. Let me click OK. Now let's zoom in on her face, and let me see if you can see that difference. Oh yeah, little cooler. That's what that took. Okay, so this was pretty quick. It's by no means perfect, but this is a great technique. What you want to do is, if you have a subject that's dark on white or white on dark, sample the background color, add a new layer, and use the blending mode of difference. And that will show you everything's different, and then build up these production layers to create the mask. Now, if your files are getting too big, you don't need these layers anymore. You can throw them out. And the easiest way to do that is make sure none of them are active or visible. You come to the Layers flyout menu and you choose Delete Hidden Layers and click Yes, and that'll reduce your file size.